It has been a long time since I filmed, I'm not gonna lie, and I've had... Why don't I just show you actually? I have been so frustrated, and this is the reason why. This is the reason I haven't been filming. This fiddle leaf fig is doing my head in. It's just having every problem that a fiddle leaf fig could have. Anyway, so I've been watching so many videos about how to solve fiddle leaf problems. So that's what I've been doing, because I've been more worried about a damn plant that keeps trying to die on me. Essentially, I have a very toxic relationship with my plant. Anyway, let's actually film the video. It is my top albums of all time video. Intended for this to be a 10 album list. It's turned into a 30 album list. It was a 38 one, and I brought it down to 30, okay? So it's good enough for me. There's just too many good albums that I really like that I don't want to leave out of the list. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a top 30 list for you. I've got a list. I'm gonna listen to a few songs and show you what my top 30. Time Out from the Dave Brubeck Quartet. Jazz! Yeah, okay. This falls at my number 30 slot. I really like jazz music, and this album especially is the jazz album that I grew up with. My dad played this album a lot while I was growing up, so that's sort of where I get my love for this album from. It's got the classic Take 5 on it, of course. One of the best jazz songs to ever exist. Oh, I love the drums. But also, it has so many other songs that I find to be so catchy and so memorable. And recently, I got the vinyl record of my boyfriend for free, so I'm very happy with this. What a steal. Number 29 is Pinata by Freddie Gibbs and Madlib. This intro track, called Supplier, is one of my favorite songs of all time. It's actually my favorite song on the album. It's only about 45 seconds long, I believe. It's just got this sample of this guy talking about how to get $1. But I love it. However, there's so many other great songs in it. I think the reason why I love this album so much is it's got to be Madlib's production on it, right? Like, Freddie Gibbs, one of my favorite current rappers. No hate towards Freddie at all. If anything, I've got all love for him. But Madlib, man. Madlib is one of my favorite things to ever be in music in the last, 10 years. And I think his production style is just made for my ears, honestly. Yeah, okay. 28 is Black Messiah by D'Angelo and The Vanguard. D'Angelo is a neo-soul god. Honestly, this new release from him after an over decade-long hiatus is where it's at for me. I just love this album so much. And honestly, this record has only just really resonated with me recently, probably in the last year or so. I always really loved the song Sugar Daddy. That was my jam for so long since I ever listened to this album when it first came out. But I only re-listened to the album recently, and on re-listen I was like, wait, Sugar Daddy's just as good as every other song on this record. Number 27 is Ready to Die by Notorious B.I.G. Notorious B.I.G. was actually the only rapper I properly listened to growing up because of a CD that I had, which was his greatest hits. Don't know how I ended up getting it, and he's always just stuck with me. He has so many tracks that are just timeless, and this is obviously the best album that Notorious brought out. I think it's the only album he ever brought out while he was alive. The track Warning by him is my favorite hip-hop track ever. Number 26 is the original soundtrack from the anime Spirited Away, composed by Joe Hisaishi, who is my favorite composer of all time. I played a lot of piano growing up. I played piano for about 14 years, and he was easily my favorite pianist to learn these songs of and play constantly whenever I could find a piano. His soundtracks, I just think it's the best example of how music can enhance a film. Number 25, yours truly, Angry Mob by Kaiser Chiefs, a bit of indie rock from 10-year-old Kira, who I just loved this stuff back then. I remember owning the CD for this back in the day when I was just really discovering rock music in my preteen phase, and this album was where it was at, and I remember just dancing around constantly too. When I was younger, in my lounge room, I'd just throw the CD on and listen the whole way through so easily. And that's what makes a great album for me, is an album that I can just listen to the whole thing the whole way through, and it's just an experience for me. It's not that this is the best album to ever exist, it's more that it just really meant a lot to me at one certain point in my life. Number 24 is X and Y by Coldplay, another album that really meant a lot to me at one point in my life. I grew up with a lot of Coldplay, was born in 1996, so these 2000s CDs were, I think I read an article one time that said the music that you discover between the ages of like 10 to 14 is the music that will mean the most to you and stick with you, and that is so true for Coldplay. Number 23 is I Am a Bird Now by Anthony and the Johnsons. This is an album that I didn't grow up with, actually. I found this album in my early 20s, which only was a few years ago now. And it was my dad. My dad was playing this album while he was painting one day. And I was sitting down in my bedroom at the other side of the house. And I heard some notes. I heard some chords. And I was like, what is that? That sounds really, really sad. That sounds like it has amazing strings, amazing piano. I need in on this. And so he told me what it was. I went and listened to the whole album, and the rest is history. The rest is me lying on the floor in my bedroom crying to this album every day pretty much. So that's where it's at. I honestly don't know how Anthony does it. I know that she has quite an annoying voice. A lot of people don't like listening to her voice, but I can't get enough of it. I think that she conveys so much emotion in her singing, and that's why I love it the most. It's just her singing. I feel her pain. Number 22 is Antics by Interpol, one of my two favorite bands of all time. This is Interpol's follow-up album from their debut. This album has a lot of bangers that I love so much. I personally love early Interpol for the bass, I'm not gonna lie. Carlos D is my favorite bassist of all time, and I have literally picked up the bass, and I'm such an amateur bass player now just because I want to learn all of Carlos D's bass lines, but I just can't do it. Okay, that's the end of this album, and all I did was talk about Carlos D. Number 21 is Funeral by Arcade Fire. This is a bit of a cult classic. A lot of people love this album. A lot of people think this to be one of the best albums of all time. And hello, here I am. I agree. Leica, as you can see, I'm dancing to it right now and singing along to it right now. I love that song. It's just so intense and so amazing. But the reason I love this album so much is Crown of Love. Crown of Love is one of my favorite songs of all time. Captures the feeling of falling out of love so well from both sides in a relationship. I love songs that are about the pains of love. Number 20 is Bon Voyage, Melody's Echo Chamber. This is a new album on the list. This is from 2018. Someone explained to me why I love this album so much. I'm still not exactly sure why. I think because it's so new to the list, I can't completely explain it right now. Maybe my dancing is explaining some of it. This lo-fi guitar outro section in Cross My Heart, which is the first song on the album, gets me so good every time. But apart from that, this whole entire album is just such a treat. I've listened to the whole thing through so many times since it came out. It's just such an easy album to listen the whole way through. I don't think there's a song on it that is not great. And that's what makes a great album for me, is that there's no song that lacks. You know what I mean? Number 19 is Like Clockwork from Queens of the Stone Age. Came out in 2013, so this has been around for a little bit. I've been really vibing this album for the last 7 years. I've always loved the song If I Had a Tail, but as I listen to this album more and more throughout the last 7 years, just another song jumps out at me. And that's what makes a great album, in my opinion, is an album where you can go back to it and re-listen to it at a different point in your life, and it offers you up something that you never found from it before. Number 18 is something definitely nostalgic for me. That's An Awesome Wave by LJ. Came out in 2012. Wait, I also have this on right now. This album was at the peak of like my teenage years, and I remember listening to a lot of the songs with my high school friends and really loving this album. Breeze Blocks obviously is an amazing song, one of my favorite songs of all time, but also some of the instrumentals on this album are so nostalgia feeling. They just, I don't know what it is, just the way that Out-J puts their songs together creates such an intense feeling of nostalgia. Number 17 is Channel Orange by Frank Ocean. This is an album that I've listened to probably the most out of my whole entire life. You'd think it would be number 1 on this list, but I think easily this is the album that I've listened to the most in my life. And that would be because my mum got a CD of this album back in the day, and she would have it on repeat in the car. If you listen to an album that amount of times, it just ends up being one of your favorites. It's what happens. Number 16 is Ambient 1, Music for Airports by Brian Eno. Wow. The fact that this came out in 1978 is just beyond me. Brian Eno, an amazing producer, an amazing ambient artist. He was just so ahead of his time, and really, this is the perfect music for airports. I can't listen to a 17-minute song the whole way through. Number 15 is To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. One of the best albums to come out in the 2010s, I think there's no question about it, and one of the best jazz rap albums ever. There's just so much to unpack again with this album, and I can't even get into it right now, but it sort of speaks for itself in my opinion. Number 14 is Anti by Rihanna. This album's very nostalgic for me, and an album that I listened to a lot of times in my mum's car, once again, not gonna lie. Number 17 is Long Season by Fishmans. This came out in 1996. Represent. Me and Long Season are both turning 24 this year. This is an album that I just randomly stumbled across on Spotify one day. It was recommended to me a few years ago while I was studying my master's program, and it became my study anthem. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's just the best album to concentrate to, but it's also an album that you can just float off into another world with, honestly. Oh, that double bass. Erykah Badu, Baduism. I love Erykah Badu. She's my favorite female artist of all time, 100%. She is absolutely beautiful. Her voice is my favorite voice ever. I don't know how she does it. It's just so catchy the way she sings. And also the first 3 songs on this album are literal perfection. They're just perfect. Apple Tree, On and On. Oh. Number 11 is Untitled, or Number 4 by Led Zeppelin. Came out in 1971 and is one of my dad's favorite albums of all time, and is now one of my favorite albums of all time. You can't really deny Led Zeppelin, honestly. They are one of the best bands to ever exist and will always be. They are the hard rock kings. And for me, this album is my favorite listening experience when it comes to Led Zeppelin. Misty Mountain Hop, Going to California, Black Dog. There's just so many songs on this album that I love to death. Even the song When the Levee Breaks, which I never particularly got around when I was younger, I'm just now starting to really appreciate. This album is just Led Zeppelin at their greatest. There's explosive bursts of hard rock on this album, as well as very quiet folk moments as well, and I think it's just blended perfectly here. Number 10 is Undergone Infinity by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. An album that is probably the most recent one to make it onto my list. I didn't realize how much I loved this album until I gave it a re-listen while I was getting this video together. I'm not even kidding you. I know I'm a King Gizzard lover and I bring them up a lot, but I never really had an album that I could signify as my favorite of theirs until I gave this album a re-listen just to make sure was it going to make it onto my list, and it turns out it's actually one of my favorite albums ever. The whole thing is a dance fest from start to end. Oh my god. So number 9 is The Low End Theory by Tribe Called Quest from 1991. My favorite rap album ever. This album is actual perfection. If you can't tell, I love jazz rap, and Q-Tip and Phife Dawg will forever remain in my heart till the day I die. The jazz hip-hop beats that they are able to create on this album are just so delicious. I just eat them up every single time. I can't stop moving, and especially on the, if you can't tell, on the song Scenario, which is the final track on this album. I love the whole entire thing from back to front. Every single lyric, every single rhyme essentially on this song is amazing, especially the Busta Rhymes verse. So great. One of my favorite rap verses to ever exist. Number 8 is Q, Are We Not Men? A, We Are Devo by Devo. This album I mention so much because I can't stop thinking about it. I always have loved new wave. It's always been a genre that's really hit me growing up since I was very young. I just find the whole genre to be so fun, so wacky, and I love it for that reason. And I think this album perfectly encapsulates new wave for me and why I love it so much. And apart from that, they actually just have amazing songwriting ability. Like, their songs are so catchy. Devo is also loved by a lot of my older relatives and older family members, so it's just been around a lot in my life and has always been loved by what I have come from, so I need to continue on that tradition. Number 7 is Love Angel Music Baby by Gwen Stefani. Oh my god, I was, 7 years old when this came out, and I haven't looked back since. This album was the first album that I truly ever loved. I still have such fond memories in primary school of me and my best friend loving this album and just singing along to it constantly. It was my anthem growing up. I think it is the epitome of 2000s pop. Number 6 is In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. This band is one of my dad's favorites once again, and I always saw this amazing album cover around in my lounge room because my dad owned the vinyl, and I'd always look at it and be like, what is that? That looks really weird, super scary. What's up with that? And eventually got around to listening to it when I was older and came back to it, and wow. Well, that's all I can say about this. Progressive rock is amazing, and this album is amazing. This songwriting and instrumentation on this album is so intense and so explosive, and that is why I love it so much. Also the singing, just everything essentially is why I love this album. Epitaph is my favorite song on this album by far. The part at the end where he just starts screaming, crying, it gives me so many goosebumps, and I just feel the emotion. And I love albums where I can just feel the emotion. Number 5 is Hatful of Hollow by the Smiths. Wow, I mean, I know this is a compilation album, but even if I include every single compilation album to ever exist, this is the only one that would make it onto the list. It's easily my favorite compilation album ever. The reason I love it so much is it just literally has every single one of my favorite Smiths songs ever. I don't know who compiled this thing, but they have the exact same Smiths taste as me. And I don't really need to go anywhere else for any other Smiths because all my favorite songs by them are on this album. The Smiths are amazing. They are absolutely brilliant. The Smiths runs through my blood. Number 4, Discovery by Daft Punk. This is my favorite electronica album of all time. I think it is the best electronica album of all time. You can't convince me otherwise. It's not gonna happen. They're just the best. This album, I love nearly every single song on it. There's probably like only 1 or 2 songs I don't like. I am very picky, and there is no album that I've ever listened to where I love every single song off it. But this album, there really is only like 1 song maybe where I don't really like it. My fiddle leaf fig has moved to the ground because I'm bottom watering it at the moment because I'm trying to save it through bottom watering. Doesn't seem to really be working, but that's fine. I'm gonna keep trying different things until something works. Number 3 is A Rush of Blood to the Head by Coldplay. Oh my god. This is where it really starts to hit, guys. This is just my whole entire heart. This right now, this whole album. And you know what? This was never actually consciously one of my favorite albums until recently. It's always been one of my favorites, but I just never made the connection of how much I loved this album until I actually was putting this list together. And I was like, wait, this is easily top 5. There are so many beautiful songs on this album with so many amazing outros. This is the album of outros. Number 2 is Turn on the Bright Lights by Interpol. wow. I mean, it's obvious how much I love Antics, so imagine how much I love their debut. It's beyond me how much I love this. Once again, Carlos D's bass playing on this album is just to die for. I need to learn every single pluck of the bass that is on this album. It is my life's mission. Oh, the bass. Stella Was a Diver is what this channel is named after. If that doesn't explain to you how much I love this album, but I don't know what will. Before the number one, let me do a few, and by a few I mean about 25 special mentions, because I had to leave out so many albums that I love from this list, and there's probably a lot more that I can't even remember. So let me quickly rattle those off for you. Trouble Will Find Me by The National, I Am Such a Fierce by Beyonce, Hail to the Thief by Radiohead, Kinda Blue by Miles Davis, Since I Left You by The Avalanches, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill by Lauryn Hill, Introducing by DJ Shadow, Play by Moby, The Arc Android by Janelle Monáe, The Black and White Album by The Hives, Wide Awake by Parquet Courts, Children of God by Swans, Saturation No. 3 by Brockhampton, Bloomed by Richard Buckner, Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division, Demon Days by Gorilla, Headhunters by Herbie Hancock, The B-52 self-titled, Slow Dive self-titled, Tame Impala The Slow Rush, Aphex Twins I Care Because You Do, Lana Del Rey's Born to Die, and that's it. Let's figure out what number one is, even though we all know what number one is. Number one is In Rainbows by Radiohead. It was sitting here the whole time. This is an album that I mention in every single one of my videos because this album and me were attached at the hip. We are one and the same essentially. Look at this little cute CD right now. That's the cutest thing I've ever seen. This album I love for so many reasons. It is the album that I fell in love with music with. Like, this album is what made me realize how influential music can be to a person and who they are. This album is like a best friend to me. I think that's what a perfect album is. And yes, okay, I don't like every single song on this album, but it doesn't matter because there's about 6 or 7 songs on this album that are like my top favorite songs of all time. So I don't really know what else to do but put this in the number one spot because it does include several songs that are my favorite songs of all time. It's so cute. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm so exhausted from this whole ordeal. I'm gonna go rest for the rest of the day. I really need it after that. And yeah, that's my top 30 albums, sorta. I mean, the best that I can put it together right now. This list will inevitably change quite a lot. I could do this list in another like 6 months and it might be very different because I might have forgotten about albums that I didn't realize that I actually really like. But these are all the albums I can remember, and I can't wait to find more albums to add to this list over the next few decades. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and support my channel. And until next time, bye.